Greetings and welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you could be here. Before we begin, please remember this. If you enjoyed this content, please consider hitting that like button, dropping a comment, sharing the video with a friend, and subscribing if you haven't already. Now, on with the story. The Deathworlders, a story by Philip R. Johnson, aka Hambone, Hambone HFY, and Hambone 3110. Chapter 17, Battles, Part 1. Date point, 4 years, 8 months AV. Classified facility, Planet Earth, Sol. Hugh Johnson. No, nothing like that. It's hard to say. It wasn't like a dream or like being trapped. It wasn't like anything. I was just dead for a while, and somebody else was using my body. And when he was done, he brought me back, but not the same. And there was still a part of me alive, kinda. Hugh trailed off, then shrugged helplessly. It was a very strange feeling to be treated as if he was a stranger by someone he knew so well. But of course, Carl had spent months getting to know his passenger, rather than Hugh himself. "You aren't making much sense," Carl told him. I know. I think, Hugh paused to think, that alone was a luxury he hadn't enjoyed for so very long, and he'd never been a man of many or eloquent words. He just didn't know how to go about describing experience without involvement, existence without awareness. The words to hint at what had been his life for the last several years just weren't in his vocabulary. He hit on an idea. The drone needs to act like a person, he explained. But Meat doesn't know how to. That part's all up to, you. The bit of you that's yourself, But that bit can't be in charge because if it was, I'd have run into a hospital and begged them, get these damn things out of my head. That makes sense. Okay, so they hit this sweet spot where I wasn't in charge, but there was just enough of me sticking around for the body to pretend to be a real person. You follow? They retained your instincts and knowledge of correct social behavior while suppressing your capacity for agency and rational thought, Carl said. Hey, if you say so, I never was too good with words. You were a vagrant before they did this to you? I was a bum, yeah, he replied. Dropped out of school, hit the bottle, never looked up. All I cared about was the next 40, I follow you. What did you do for cash? You name it, Sometimes I'd head out east, be a farmhand, ranching. Sometimes I'd do favors for people, like, my friend's moving house. Can you help move her couch? That kind of shit, right? Sometimes I'd be a lookout if somebody was robbing someplace, or I'd scrounge up some food, boil up a stew, and sell it on cold days up north. All sorts of things. I did a few years for petty theft, shoplifting, Probably would have gone back in if the aliens hadn't got me first. How did that happen? I was down on the border helping this guy I'd met through a friend. He was helping the Mexicans, They'd pay him. He'd get them up here. They'd get in this van I was driving, and I'd get them up to L.A. I figured it was a win-win, If we managed it, I'd get my cut of what they paid him. If not, then I'd be back inside. You wanted to go back to prison? Hell yeah. 2 hots in a cot, Anyway, I was bouncing my ass all over the desert in the middle of the night, driving through this piece of shit transit when the engine cut out on me. Now, I know engines. Done some work fixing cars to get by in my time, and I never had an engine just stop on me like that. It just went pop, and it was like I'd taken the key out. So I stopped, got out, and had a look. I'm still staring at what looks like a pristine-ass engine when somebody turned on the lights. I looked up and, well, that's all she wrote for me. Next time I was myself again would be today. Can you remember what the biodrone did? What Six did? Shit, Six was fine. He just wanted to get out and explore, Find out what a burger tasted like, that kind of thing. But that other one, man, he ordered the drone to go kill that poor Boone lady. And I still remember that clear as day. like he was ordering it to take out the goddamn trash. How did the biodrone escape the scene? The only footage we have shows it standing there in one frame and gone the next. What, you haven't figured that part out yet? We have our suspicions. Like what? Carl cocked his head slightly, then said carefully, Personally, I think they have a spaceship on Earth. Hugh nodded. You're goddamn right they do. Date point: 4 years, 8 months, 1 week, 2 days AV. Capital Station, orbiting planet Garden. The assassin worked alone, always. Obviously, doing so increased some of the risks of his vocation, but it also reduced some others. The trade had, for a career of some 12 human years, worked out in his favor, albeit with some near misses. His existence was known amongst certain circles. His nature was not. A large part of his success came from the fact that a prejudiced galaxy looked at his species and saw only tiny, physically frail, opportunistic cowards with big brains. Whenever the identity of the assassin was speculated upon, the usual assumptions were that he must be Chinasho, or maybe Locale, or even Kelsey. Not Kortai. Never Kortai. Kortai were overlooked, or rather, looked at in the wrong way. But a tiny, frail body was no limitation at all when you had access to Directorate technology. And so, one moment he was a medical technician. In the instant that nobody and nothing looked at him, a simple change of which tool he was holding and fiddling with turned him into an engineer, then a bureaucrat, or maybe a diplomatic aide. Never anybody important, just another little gray body padding about the station corridors, engrossed in some task that was obviously much more important than whatever or whoever was around him. It was critical that, on this job in particular, he should go undetected. He had never been commissioned to silence a member of the Dominion Security Council before. There would undoubtedly be repercussions, which he was keen to avoid. The caution cost him time, as he made entirely sure that the timing was perfect, and that there was no possibility of anything going wrong. But time was a plentiful luxury. Finally satisfied that his preparations were as comprehensive as was feasible, he put his plan into motion. It was not a difficult plan. While the elevator control systems on Council Station were as hack-proof as the very best minds in the Directorate could conceive, they still had a few loopholes. Nothing that might deliver him outside of his clearance level, but enough. The one he used was a simple maintenance cycle, an unscheduled degauss of the elevator's propulsion coils. That little trick earned him 12 seconds. 12 seconds in which, guided by an array of force fields dazzling in their subtlety, complexity, and finesse, the emergency exit hatch was unsealed, lifted out, and he was lifted through, the hatch replaced, and its seals re-engaged. He barely even glanced at them. The spinal elevator shaft of the Great Station, the largest ever built, was its own hazard course, absolutely not intended for hospitality. The elevators were not bound to individual tracks, but switched constantly from one path to another, flashing past their peers with millimeter clearances, guided by a central routing system that handled thousands of such narrow-margin trajectories per day, and had done so for years with a callous disregard for the presence of anything within the transit shaft that did not belong there. Technology again came to his rescue. The constant weave and dance and sometimes retreat that kept the hurtling cars from reducing him to a fine organic cloud of red vapor impeded his progress, but it did deliver him safely to his destination, high on the outermost apex of one of the VIP habitation clusters. After that obstacle course, the door was child's play. The Councilor's personal suite was stunning. It was a garden of a dozen worlds, arranged both for aesthetic delight and ecological accuracy. Even the assassin was awed, granting himself a moment's pause to examine the delights on offer as he stalked through the suite, quietly impressed by the subtle way in which the apartment's suite's necessities, luxuries, and furniture were all hidden amongst the assorted alien foliage. Hello? The assassin spun. Twin plasma bolts, weapons that he could never have fired if not for his exoskeleton harness and its powerful tuned shields, would have reduced the target to a steaming mess, had he actually been present. Instead, they shattered the blue haze around a display and immolated something like a tree, which made a distressed hooting sound as it deflated amid the flames. On their way, they passed through a hologram of the target.
I apologize for my absence, but I would prefer not to be murdered today, the apparition continued. Nor on any other day, for that matter. I do apologize for killing you in this way. I don't suppose it shall be very pleasant.
Earnest contrition described a glowing puce stripe down its flank. The assassin looked around wildly, immediately on his guard. Was that the whine of hunter-killer drones? No, just the tree keening its last. His chest felt tight, despite the absence of any apparent violence. No turrets unfolded from the floors. No armed Annabedalin shock troopers stormed him. He coughed, or tried to. The result was much more like a violent wheeze. Breathing really had become very difficult. He coughed again, and this time blood spurted from his nostrils, joining the thin trickle that had begun to stain the corners of his eyes.
I wish I could send you alive back to your employers with a warning to leave me alone. But your reputation precedes you, you see.
The holographic ghost of Councilor Vedrig continued.
You are very well known for your tenacity and for seeing the job through, all of which left me feeling rather like I had no other choice.
How? The assassin croaked, desperately querying the pseudo-sentient medical pack he'd carried for anything that resembled a solution. He didn't expect an answer from the hologram of his target, but he received one nonetheless. Whether Vedrig had thought to include it or programmed a simple response in was unclear.
The hardest and most dangerous part was in configuring the containment field to collapse in the same circumstances that triggered this recording, you see. One slip, and I would have finished as you are now.
The assassin's black-edged vision settled on one particular plant, right in the middle of the suite that no longer had a field around it. Somehow, he knew exactly which planet this specimen had come from.
It's called a mountain cedar, if you're interested. It is quite possibly the deadliest plant in the galaxy. Humans, apparently, like the smell. But even they can suffer some quite severe allergic reactions to its pollen. I imagine it is a terrible way to go, but, well, I had nothing else to hand. I am sorry.
The assassin was far beyond the capacity to answer. An hour later, in response to Vedrig's programming, the suite resurrected the containment field around the Terran plants and initiated a maximum threat biohazard cleanup protocol. Only after the gardens were absolutely guaranteed to be clean of every last pollen grain was station security finally alerted. Date point: 4 years, 8 months, 1 week, 4 days AV. Freelance vessel Sanctuary. Julian at Sicily. I was caught in the middle of a railroad track. Thunder! There was a lot of welding to do. Julian had taken a couple of weeks learning the skill down on Earth, grateful to be home, enjoying the place. He wasn't sure what Kirk had been up to. Personable as he was, Sanctuary's owner and master kept his secrets well, and was probably playing a game that he, Julian, didn't know the rules to. But he'd been there, ready to pick them up, when San Diego had died. I looked around, and I knew there was no turning back. Thunder! Sanctuary had changed, too. A lot of Kirk's old passengers were back on board. People who had returned to Earth, learned how to be human again, and then, well, felt the call. Fitter, better fed, and harder one and all, and more driven. They'd taken on guns and ammo, filled the jump array with floor mats for physical training and martial arts when it wasn't in use. Some uniforms had come on board, taken a look around, and left only after leaving an extensive list of recommended modifications. Hence, the welding. By the time they were done, the ship would be less elegant, but much sturdier. My mind raced, and I thought, what could I do? Thunder! And I knew there was no help from you. Thunder! Between the deafening music and his welding mask, he neither saw nor heard the workshop door open, and he was so focused on getting the weld right that he didn't feel the gravity automatically adjust itself to galactic standard. He damn near jumped out of his skin when he was tapped on the shoulder. Sound of the drums beating in my heart. Kirk waved expressively at him with his two smaller arms, clamping the larger ones over his ears and shouting, though unable to summon the volume to compete with Angus Young. Julian tried to order the room to turn the music off, but apparently it couldn't hear him either. He fished in his pocket for the remote control he'd built. Thunder of guns! Slam! Tore me apart! You've been... What's up? He asked, as Kirk relaxed in silence. That can't be good for your hearing. It's a classic. Kirk issued a strange sort of whickering sound, the Ruckaturp version of a derisive snort. Julian, classic would be Vivaldi or Sibelius. That's classical. What's up, anyway? I was just asking you to turn it down. I could hear it all the way from the flight deck. Ah, Julian grimaced. He was still adjusting to having other people around him after years of isolation, and loud music was a luxury he'd gone without for too long. Sorry. Yeah, but I was enjoying it. The no voice belonged to Allison. While an entertainment binge on Earth, and getting laid several times, had largely cured Julian of his awkwardness around women, it threatened to come surging back whenever she entered the room. It's good workout music, she explained, as Kirk turned his ungainly, lanky frame to face her. Julian at Sicily, wilderness master and 6-year survival of the deadliest planet in the known galaxy, awkwardly cleared his throat and turned his attention back to the bulkhead reinforcement he had been welding, because the alternative was to be distracted by the enticing way Allison's sweat was making her sports shirt adhere to her skin and soaking her blonde ponytail. Focusing on that turned out to be even harder when she poked her head over his shoulder, radiating her heat and a clean physical scent. Good weld. Thanks, he commented, for lack of something better to say. I didn't know you knew welding. I don't, she murmured straight in his ear, then headed back through to the gym, glancing back to make sure he was admiring the yoga pants-enhanced view. Jeez, Julian muttered, wiping his forehead, then followed up with, Oh, shut up! This was in response to Kirk making an amused noise. What? The alien asked innocently. He leaned in close to inspect the weld himself. Go ahead and say it. Kirk shook his mane. No thanks. I've watched too much TV to follow into that cliched old trope. Alien comments on human romance and sexuality? Not I. He bared his teeth in a poor imitation of a smile. I'm still allowed to find it funny, though. Julian picked up the welder, and after both he and Kirk had protected their eyes, resumed his work. I'm not going for it. Oh? She'll say no. I know why she's doing this. She likes to be looked at. She likes the power of lust. The second she puts out, we're not playing that game no more. And she knows I'm the easiest mark on this ship. I see. Sure you do. I do. You're no idiot, Julian. You're one of the toughest and most resourceful people I know. And if I were in your position, I'd resent being manipulated like that. Yeah, Julian did admit just how accurate Kirk's candid appraisal really was. Makes me feel like a dumbass, though. Bomb fruit? No problem. Man-grabber plants? Fought them back for 3 days straight with a machete and fire. Hellbirds? Ate 'em for lunch. I even killed a mini Zilla once. Cool, calm, and sensible the whole time. Show me a nice ass, though, and suddenly I'm a school kid again.
It is an exceptional ass, though, Kirk said, finally drawing a laugh from him.
How would you know? He chuckled. She's got a third as many legs as you're attracted to.
Oh, I can still be an academic expert on the subject, Kirk said, speaking as an anthropologist.
Julian grunted and raised his mask to examine his handiwork. Hey, 4 more of these and we'll be able to put the pressure door in.
I still don't see why you all insisted on them, Kirk grumbled. What's the point in having internal pressure control force fields if we rely on thick steel eyesores instead?
What's the failure point on that giant power core you've got back there? And what happens when the power goes? What happens if we get EMP'd? I'm less interested in keeping the ship pretty than keeping air in my lungs.
Kirk waved an irritable forelimb. Yes, we've gone over all those arguments, he groused. I swear your species is paranoid.
Julian just raised an eyebrow at him.
Deathworlders? Right. Yes.
Where are we going, anyways?
Isberg.
Again? Julian put his welding torch down.
I thought they were pretty clear about not wanting to see any more humans ever again after the bank robberies, the murders, and the Exos massacre.
Not Erbzerk, Isberg, Kirk said, as if that clarified things. It's a city on Ikbrzik. Julian pinched the bridge of his nose.
Kirk, he began to complain.
Kirk snorted, a proper nostril-flapping equine snort.
As I recall, your home nation contains New York State, which is not to be confused with New York City, or Newark, he pointed out.
Julian paused. Yeah, okay, so this Ikbrzik.
Well done. It's a planet? A barren one, yes, but the richest source of rare earth elements in domain space.
So what's there besides mines?
Weaker sensors, a smaller garrison, lighter security, and a population of underpaid, hard-working civilians with an insatiable appetite for entertainment, which their employers don't provide.
Julian nodded his understanding.
So, it's a black market hub. Nearly as much so as perfection, Kirk agreed, and less well known, which makes it an attractive route for smuggling the especially sensitive goods, but that's not why we're going there.
Do tell.
An old and dear friend of mine asked me to meet him there.
Date point, 4 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, AV. Folktha, Planet Cimbrian, The Far Reaches. Ava Rios. All right, looks like that's our time for today. Lessons were a simple affair. It was very different to school as Ava knew the term. There being only a small handful of children and teenagers, there was no point in segregating everybody by age, or even in holding formal classes. It was more like dedicated study time with their teacher, Miss Olmsted, not giving a lesson, but instead flitting from student to student, by turns helping with basic addition, biology, simple reading comprehension, physics, geometry, tying shoes, and gently reminding the older ones to refocus on their work. As much as it suited her, Ava still felt the same relief and freedom when the end of the lessons for the day came around. As pleasant, personal, and liberated as Folktha's school might be, it was still school, and that meant not getting to enjoy the colony's perfect spring weather. Sarah was bouncing by her desk before Ava and Adam even finished packing up. Ava rolled her eyes, suppressing a smile. "Do I get to know what the surprise is now, Sarah?" she asked. Sarah had not been so much hinting at a surprise as outright mentioning it at every opportunity for 3 days. "Mom and Dad said I can drive the mule this weekend," Sarah exploded, bouncing on her toes. Kieran, Jack, Lizzie, and I are going to go down to the lake and go swimming. It's really cool down there, and the water's so clear. You can see the crashed spaceships on the bottom. You want to come?"
It sounded amazing. Ava had been on the swim team in the high school, and she realized how much she missed it.
"That sounds great. If only I had a swimsuit."
This seemed to nonplus Sarah.
"What do you need a swimsuit for?" she asked. Sarah, what else will I wear?" "You don't need to wear anything when you're swimming. What's the point? You just have to bring wet clothes home." "So, you're going to be swimming with Jack and Kieran and Lizzie?" "Yeah." "Naked? So?" "Sarah, that's weird."
She regretted saying it the second she did, but regretted it even more the second it registered in Sarah's brain. The younger girl looked like she'd been slapped.
"That's not weird," she snapped, her eyes going red and watery. "You're being weird, making such a big deal of it."
She spun and effected a perfect flouncing exit.
"Sarah!"
Ava called after her, but to no avail. She turned to Adam.
"That's weird, right? Swimming naked together is weird."
"Well, Adam didn't get any further than that before being interrupted by a giggle from Jessica Olmsted.
"That was pretty much what everyone else thought the first time," she said. "But it's innocent. She really doesn't see why people have a problem with it." "How can she not?" Ava asked.
Jessica giggled again.
"I love Sarah's parents, but it's a miracle that the girl didn't end up being called Nebula Moondance or something," she said. "She got off lucky just being called Sarah Honeydew."
Judging from her expectant smile, there was a joke in there which went straight over Ava's head, and Adam's too, judging from his expression. Jessica laughed softly and shook her head at their blank faces.
"Let's just say they're uninhibited," she said. "Yes, it makes the rest of us a bit uncomfortable sometimes, but we discussed it at the thing, and the consensus was, so long as it's harmless."
"Skinny dipping always sounded like fun to me," Adam said.
"Adam!" Ava protested. "What? I'm just saying, if it's just good fun, well, maybe we shouldn't be so—"
He stopped himself.
"I mean—" "So what, Adam?" Ava demanded.
Unnoticed, Jessica grimaced to herself and slipped away.
"Shouldn't be so what?" "I was gonna say so uptight about it," he confessed.
That hurt, and it made her mad, too. She poked him in the chest.
"You just want to see other girls naked," she accused, hitting on the first thing that came to mind to hurt him back.
He backed off a step, rubbing where she'd prodded him.
"What? Ava, they're kids. Don't be weird." "You're being weird." "I'm just saying it sounds like fun."
She snarled a disgusted noise, spun and walked away from him.
"Whatever. Go run to your daddy for advice, like always."
He shouted after her.
"What the hell's my dad got to do with anything?"
She paused at the door just long enough to yell,
"At least you still have one!"
and then slammed it behind her, storming off into the forest, away from anyone and everyone. She paused once she was certain he wasn't following, and leaned against a tree, arms folded over her tummy. The alien bark was smooth and cracked softly as she slid down, until she was sitting in a little ball amongst the roots, wrapped up in being equally angry at Adam, herself, and the universe, and cried. Date point: 4 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, AV. Folktha, Cimbrian colony. Captain Owen Powell.
"I don't fucking care if they are small. This is a military base, and that means kids stay out of it. Or are you too fucking incompetent to do your job as a fucking sentry?"
The soldier he was chewing out knew better than to respond, and just stood there and took it. He earned points for that at least. Powell cooled down slightly.
"Have you got an explanation for me, Corporal?"
"Sir, 3 of them distracted me while the 4th snuck past behind me. I take full responsibility."
"Noted and accepted. We're short-handed since the recall. That's a reason to be extra vigilant. Am I clear?"
"Yes, Captain."
"You're fucking right I am. This is a serious incident, which means it's getting written up. but that's as far as I can be asked to do, this time. See to it there isn't a next time. Dismissed.
The man saluted and left, clearly relieved. As he left, he was replaced by Lieutenant Ross. Since the colony had been handed over formally to the British government, the Americans, Canadians, Aussies, and other Allied soldiers had all been recalled, replaced with a platoon from the British Army. They were good lads, but universally young and inexperienced, and there wasn't quite enough of them. Most of the special forces had also been recalled, leaving only Powell and his hand-picked squad, including Legsy and Ross.
Found the ankle biters yet?
He asked. Yes, sir, they owned up. There's only 4 kids in town at that age range anyways.
I want a word with them and their parents.
The weekly thing's tomorrow, sir, Ross pointed out. Raising it there might get the message across better.
Aye, good shout. What's the news?
Ross handed over some packages. Dispatches and your comfort package. Sit rep on the San Diego investigation and a strategic report on nerve jam weaponry.
Lovely. Summarize that one for me,
Powell said, accepting the rest of his mail. Ross nodded and flipped through the file, mumbling slightly to himself as he skimmed through the summary. Exhaustive testing, thing conclusive, remain. At this point, the operating principles of this weapons system remain unknown and impossible to duplicate with Terran technology. Mumble, absence of, token resistance only. Given the above, development of effective protection has not been accomplished, even with total sensory isolation from the effect offering no more than a reduction in its effectiveness. Mumble, acute cerebral, hemorrhage, wow. Okay. While the weapon's effects are highly lethal at their maximum effect, probable long-term consequences of nerve gem trauma includes an increased stochastic probability of long-term complications including schizophrenia, paranoid delusions, dissociative identity disorder, motor nerve palsy, epilepsy, and stroke.
Jesus fucking Christ, Powell muttered.
Ross cleared his throat. At present, the only viable countermeasure to this weaponry in a tactical situation is destruction of the grenade, if possible, and prioritizing the termination of any hostile unit which appears to be deploying them. Engage it long range only.
Nothing we couldn't figure out for ourselves then, Powell commented. Fucking useful, that.
Yes, sir, the captain sighed.
All right, spread that tactical advice to the lads, along with the news about there being no protection from the bloody things. Don't include the bit about the long-term complications.
Anything else, sir? Ross asked, indicating the dispatches.
Not to act on. Today's Tuesday?
Yes, sir. Militia training today. Both of those kids from San Diego signed up. A new police chief's boy and his missus.
Good. Those two looked young and fit. And Aries says his lad knows his way around a pistol at least. And if the boy's going into civilian policing, we're going to want him to know how to fight.
Think you might swing by later to inspect the training, sir?
Aye. I think I just might. Watching Legsy in teaser mode is always good for a fucking laugh.
Date point. 4 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, AV. Series base, Seoul. Drew Cavendish. And I'm telling you, you're bloody paranoid, mate. Drew, Cavendish was a picture of Zen calm, but he was slowly starting to lose his cool with his friend. Have you seen the figures? We always knew this was going to be a dangerous job, Cavo. And I'm asking you, mate, have you seen the figures? Did you actually look at them? Drew Martin nodded. Of course I bloody did. I know I liar it up, mate, but if my site leader hands me a report marked important and fucking safety incident statistics, then I fucking read it, cover to cover, twice. Good. Then you can read this one, too. Drew handed it over. Technically, Series Base was a completely digital office, because ink and paper were expensive to bring from Earth, and whereas between the nuclear reactor and the solar collection fields, electrons were all but free. He'd paid for the hard copy version of the report out of his own pocket, wanting to make a statement. Nothing got the point across quite like physically handing over a 2-inch manila folder. The fuck is this? Druam asked, dropping it onto his desk and opening it.
Every significant, serious, and critical incident report for the whole of Series Base since the launch of Hephaestus 1, Cavendish told him. Everything from the dodgy landing of the IBM-S module and the relocation of the CHM, and the suit HDF emitter problems, the airlock seals blowing, the collector array hiccups, that god-awful mess in the refinery, right up to the power surge down in the canteen this morning.
As Martin opened the folder and started reading down the summary sheets at the front, he added,
I've also got personal testimonies, including one from Dr. Gunwardner, saying that in his considered medical opinion, the only reason we've not had any deaths yet is divine intervention. I put it down to good engineering, Druam muttered as he read. You and me both, mate. If everything around here wasn't triple redundant, backed up and safety checked and reinforced to hell and gone.
Druam flipped the sheet over and muttered,
Struth,
upon seeing 6 more pages of summaries waiting for him, in densely packed 10-point Times New Roman.
Shit, is there anything that hasn't gone wrong up here?
The IBM Z series mainframes, Cavendish said promptly.
They're the notable exception. If you don't count their module landing wrong in the first place, the IBM labs and the data center are the only things that haven't suffered failures at or near the maximum projections. So wait, all this is in range? It's worst case scenario stuff, but...
Cavendish sighed through his teeth and turned his head away.
Okay, admittedly, yes, it's on the extremely pessimistic end of our projected range, but it's still in range. Barely. If it's in range... Don't say it, Drew. I'm not paranoid. I'm telling you, I think we have a saboteur on board. If we do, he's a drongo. Who sabotages the place while being careful not to peek outside of what we've prepared for? Cavo, mate, face it, you are just expecting things to go better. I was, Drew admitted, because it should be.
Druam fished in his pocket and aimed a green laser dot at one of the many documents tacked to his office wall.
It should be inside that range, he emphasized. And it is. Barely. And we should be improving as we put things into place. We should be seeing patterns that we can compensate for. Instead, it's bloody everything. Anything can go wrong. Bloody right, mate. Murphy in action.
Cavendish sighed.
You're going to say I'm paranoid again, aren't you? Yeah, nah, I'm taking this seriously, Cavo. My right-handed god on that. We all are. But we can't jump straight to sabotage. Well, I hope not. Or if it is, that I talk you round before somebody dies.
He stuck out a hand. Druam grabbed it, hoisted himself upright, and slapped his bare arm round his shoulders in a brief masculine hug.
Come on, mate. Let's hit the speakeasy, he said.
Date point. 4 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, AV. Folk the colony, Cimbrian. The far reaches. Adam Aries.
A black belt in karate? Fucking hell. Wax on, wax off.
The class laughed as Legsy pantomimed the exaggerated arm-waving motion and an all-too-serious expression. Adam laughed too, glad for the entertaining distraction, stopping him from going over and over the argument with Ava in his head. He hoped she was okay. Legsy sobered. Fucking seriously then, mate. Come here and come at me, he said, leaning on his back foot and gesturing towards himself nonchalantly. The black belt stepped forward and took his guard. Legsy flashed forward with an alarming speed for a man his size. The black belt put up a few seconds of desperate resistance, but he fell flat on his back in the dirt in short order with Legsy's knife, a length of wooden dowel, pressed to his throat. None of that bowing and scraping bullshit, the huge Welshman informed him as he stood up. Karate is a sport. You lot are here to learn how to fight, and fighting means killing the other cunt before he kills you, not bowing and scoring points, all right? He helped the hapless student up. How many times did I stab him there? Anyone see? 3, no, 4, Adam said, raising his hand. Good boy, Legsy gave him a thumbs up. He turned to the black belt. You're dead, mate, which means you get to be my training dummy for the day. This drew general laughter as the unfortunate man bravely lined up for demonstration. Legsy chuckled and waved his hands. Relax, pal, I'm taking the piss. Now we're training for ET combat here, which is a bit different from fighting another human. The good news is, it's a lot fucking easier. ETs are slower, weaker, squishier, can't see, hear, or even smell as we do. All of these give you a huge advantage. The bad news is, they've got some tricks and technology up their sleeves that we don't. And this bad boy is human enemy number 1. Several people recoiled as the holographic projector, courtesy of Scotch Creek and the same technology that powered the colony's camouflage field, snapped on, and a full-size hunter fidgeted and glared at them. It was truly hideous, an amalgam of several human nightmares, from its vaguely arachnoid physique and slick, pale skin, to the way that skin inflamed and exuded pus around the implants that violated its limbs, torso, and face. The face itself was an otherwise featureless ovoid full of far too many steak-knife teeth and an odd number of eyes, all of which blinked, often and alone, without apparent sequence. The animation of the simulation was uncanny. It shifted its weight constantly, looking around, tasting the air with its tongue, which was an unnatural, startling ice blue, and tapered to a feathered end. Legsy surprised them by slapping the projection. It was the product of force field technology after all, and in fact, creating a solid surface was easier than creating a visible one. Ugly cunt, isn't he? He commented cheerfully. Well, it gets better. There's a fleet of these fuckers lurking over our head right now. They've been here since we went public. Only thing holding them back is our system force field, and that's true for Earth too. Just so you know, these bastards are why the militia exists, because if we have to fight these things off, we will. He turned towards the projection. There's not a lot to go on about how these things live. What we know is they have leaders and followers. Like a wolf pack, there's the alphas and the bottom of the pile, and everything in between. We know that they'll eat any thinking being in the skies, man, woman, or child. We know that for some reason they really don't like us and are on a crusade to wipe us the fuck right out. Some poor bastard got killed just last week catching an escape pod here. The hunters got them. Latest news is they've started using special weapons just to stop us. Heavy pulse guns, like getting smashed with a hammer. Plasma guns that'll set you on fire. Nerve jam grenades that'll have you dead and twitching before you even know they've opened fire. Fusion claws that'll have your arm off like a fucking lightsaber. These things right here are the nastiest threat we've faced by a mile. He turned back towards the now thoroughly intimidated class and gave them that winning smile. And they're all fucking stupidly easy to kill, he said. Want to learn how? Date point: 4 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, AV. Isberk, planet Ikberzik. Kirk. Kirk could hold his own in a fight and then some. After Kevin Jenkins, he was the being who had scored the second most hunter kills during the raid on Outlook on Forever. He'd kept to his training throughout his political career and his new vocation as an agent of the human race, and felt pretty confident that his skills were now at the sharpest they'd ever been. It gave him a certain sense of assuredness and confidence as he picked his way carefully through the Isberk Street Market, but that sense was hugely reinforced by the fact that Julian was in the crowd following him. It was amazing. Humans stood out in the crowd despite their smallness. There was just something about the way they moved, looked around, held themselves. Everything about a human was subconsciously predatory, and the herbivorous species of the galaxy gave them a wide berth as a result. Even wider amongst those who had heard even a fraction of the newfound Deathworlders' abilities and reputation. But Julian could vanish. It was disconcerting. He would talk with Kirk, Kirk would look away, and when he looked back, there Julian wasn't. But if he spoke to him over the silent comms implant in his head, the Deathworlder would be at his side within seconds, never approaching from an expected angle, always silent. It sent instinctive flight signals right through the ancient animal parts of Kirk's brain, which he had had to override by reminding himself that Julian was his friend and protector. Pleasingly, it even made Allison jump. In fact, he wondered if Julian was doing it specifically to get back at her for her teasing. "Jeez," she hissed for the third time as she turned around to find him walking casually alongside her. "Will you stop that?" Several beings glanced at them, alarmed by a raised human voice, then looked away, aware that taking too much notice of the business of others was potentially serious trouble. Oddly, they seemed to ignore Julian.
"Not joking this time," he said. "We're being tailed. Don't look."
Kirk and Allison exchanged a glance.
"Tailed?"
Kirk asked.
"Chinasho. 3 in the main group, 1 shadowing them. They're all wearing cloaks, but I saw some combat harnesses underneath. Looked like a kind of uniform, white with 3 lines forming a triangle on them." "Is their leader female?" Kirk asked. "I think so, yes. She has a prosthetic arm." "Zorkrup, a mercenary leader. Almost as famous as Five-Skulled Saripab himself, and with good reason. Well, they've got some of those new jolt guns." "Options?"
"Bear with me." Julian stepped aside as a stevedore drone grumbled past carrying a crate of some kind, and disappeared. "Fuck's sake," Allison complained. "Where are you, you son of a bitch?"
"Right here," he replied, walking past her in the opposite direction.
"Jeez!"
Julian kept going, vocalizing quietly over their private communications. "Quietly, please. There's a left turn up ahead into what smells like a spice market. Kirk, there's a Vizcatic at the second stall selling, and I'm quoting here, the oldest and slimiest Zerks in the expanse." "Sounds nice. I could go for a really ancient Zerk right now."
Allison muttered something that Kirk suspected might have been a complaint about how other species considered humans to be the strange ones. Julian just kept talking. "Good. Stop off and buy one. Haggle with the merchant. What they do next should tell us what they want. Allison, just like I showed you in training, all right?" "Sure," she muttered. "If they make a move, we'll let you talk for a minute, see what they want. If they're unfriendly, then we take out the 3 spares and maybe this Zorkrup can tell us something."
"Non-lethal if you can, please," Kirk said. "The Chinasho syndicates tend to take a dim view of unauthorized violence in their territory."
"You got it, boss. Enjoy your nice, rancid, dripping Zerk." Allison pulled a face which only creased up further as they got closer to the Zerk vendor. "Dear God," she complained.
"Fragrant, aren't they?" "Delicious," Kirk commented. "Good evening, cousin. These smell as good as advertised."
"Ah, it's an old family secret. All in the black rot culture," the vendor replied happily, launching into the patter that was shared by merchants of the galaxy over. "My father always said the batch wasn't ready until half of it had liquefied. Is that a human? Only my translator says she looks very ill, and I heard they carry dangerous diseases."
"They have sensitive noses, and for some reason, Zerk smells repulsive to them," Kirk explained. "Don't worry, she has a suppression implant."
"Zerk smells repulsive to them? I heard humans are strange, but the vendor faltered as Allison, who had gone a very strange color, shot him the kind of murderous glare that only a truly irate Deathworlder could. But he rallied admirably. 3 for the price of 2, and I'll throw in a frond."
"I have a better offer."
The new voice belonged to, sure enough, Zokrup, who showed something to the vendor as her 2 associates leveled shotguns at Allison.
"You go on a break and forget you spoke to this cousin of yours,"
she stated. The vendor glanced back and forth twice, then fled, as did several others nearby.
"One-shot Zokrup," Kirk said, an admirable picture of calm for somebody addressing a feared mercenary. "I'm flattered. Somebody must think very highly of me to decide that I'm worth your time."
"Compliments, Councilor Akanziktikuk. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were stupid enough to try and talk me out of my contract."
A good thing you know better then. I'm well aware that you don't betray your employers.
Zokrup blinked slowly and visibly, the Chinasho equivalent of rolling her eyes.
So why the clumsy attempt at sweet-talking me?
I'm not allowed to be polite? Incidentally, is this a murder or just an abduction?
Oh, it's an abduction. For now.
Taking out the tail, get him. Thank you, Kirk said to Zokrup and Julian both.
He drew and fired. The Chinasho were all focused on Allison, who threw herself aside and rolled as she landed, fetching up behind a stall which grounded their shotgun bolts. And by the time they realized that in fact Kirk himself was the more serious threat, two of them were down with their limbs badly broken under the hammer blows of his pulse pistols, and a cybernetic arm had whipped up and extended the fusion blade hidden within it. The air seethed where the blade had slipped right through Zokrup's personal shield and was now warring with the force field boundary. Greasy Chinasho sweat erupted all over her face at the sight of a lethally sharp point held perfectly steady only an inch away from what passed for her nose. Having a total of 4 arms had some major advantages. Amongst them was the ability to hold 4 weapons.
Bad move, Counselor,
Zokrup spat, even as she dropped her own weapons.
If you're referring to the rest of your party, my own backup has taken care of that, Kirk said.
Years of politics had schooled him in the art of ambiguity, never committing to specific numbers when vagueness could hint at accuracy where precision might be completely wrong.
Afraid I used a little too much force there, Julian added, arriving right next to the already nervous Zokrup and nearly causing her to impale herself on Kirk's blade as she started. You guys really break easy.
Kirk saw in the way Zokrup's shoulders sagged that they definitely scored a hit.
Allison?
She emerged from behind the stall, smoothing her hair down. Static electricity was holding it out away from her head and crackling viciously as he tried to tidy herself up. "A bad headache is going to be a feature of decoy duty?" she asked. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been The Deathworlders, Chapter 17, Part 1. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that like button and maybe dropping us a comment down below, and subscribing and sharing it with a friend. As always, a ginormous shout out to my editor Graygor. Thank you very much, buddy. I could not do this without you. Okay, we have reached the part of the story where the chapters start getting significantly longer. So chapters are going to start being multi 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts, depending on the length. So we'll see how that goes. So, what do y'all think of the intro music? Like it? It's called the Infinity Menu Suite, and I'm hoping to sweet talk the author into renaming it the Deathworlder Suite, or at least allowing me to do so. It just seems to capture the essence of the story for me. Okay, so who here is into longboarding? What is your favorite brand of board? Me personally, I'm a Sector 9 guy. Go ahead and leave your answers in the comments down below. In the meantime, be safe, be well. I'll see you next time. Love you all. Bye-bye. Okay, Graygor, let's get this row on the show here. All right, unfortunately, since we do not have a clicker available at the moment because there isn't one available in town for less than $30, I'm afraid I'm going to have to be using the clapper. Clap on. Yep, you know. Okay, so that said, let's begin.